Guys, this is Domino here. I wanted to kind of talk about the Elder Scrolls for a little bit, and I think it's appropriate because it's coming out in 2 days. The Elder Scrolls Skyrim preload started yesterday, I think, and mine just finished, so I'm pretty uber excited about that, and I hope to get to playing that on Friday. But yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about the Elder Scrolls and how I got into it and what I kind of think about the direction that it's going and some of the differences between what I have here in front of you, the official manual for Daggerfall. And if you don't know, Daggerfall was a game released in 1996 or 97 that I bought in the store. Growing up, I dragged my parents out and spent almost, I want to say it was 60 bucks or more on this thing. It was expensive for the time for a PC game, and I remember my parents just completely baffled how anyone could spend so much money on a computer game. I mean, it just, it just made no sense to them. And I actually never played Arena. Before I played Daggerfall. I played Daggerfall first because it was in the store, and I had played a little bit of it at a friend's house, and it was just so immersive. I was just, captivated by because I had never seen an RPG game like this before. I mean, this was not like your typically Japanese RPG games where they were simplified, and this felt like a grown-ups RPG in many ways for me. And this is what I was thinking of when I was younger, and it just kind of left an impression with me. And I kept the manual. I wish I still had the box to show you guys, but the Daggerfall box was amazing. It was a holographic skull. It had King oh God, what was the king's name? Oh man, I can't think of it. But basically in Daggerfall there was a ghost king. And I cannot think of, I will post his name in the description. But yeah, I can't think of his name. But basically the storyline, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but the storyline is that there was a ghost king whose spirit was cursed, and he was haunting the town of Daggerfall, and you basically had to put his soul to rest. That was one of the many kind of main quest lines that you were on. And the box art was just amazing. It was holographic, it was big, it had, stuff in it. And when you got this box open, you got, stuff in your box. And I'm going to try to do this with one hand, but, as you can see, just flipping through a couple pages of this, they had illustrations in here. Later on, they analyze every skill, every class. They have charts of all the gameplay mechanics, all the skills, and they explain how they work. Even towards the end, they have a list of all the monsters and a little bit of the lore behind all of them. I mean, they just don't do this anymore. They don't do this anymore with games, and it's really disappointing because, you see these small boxes nowadays with these 2-page manuals in them, and, it's lazy. And I know that they're going to argue, oh, well, game companies are just trying to save money and whatnot. I think that, and I realize I'm sounding like an old fart right now, but back in the day, they cared. It's like they gave a shit about, how the box looked. They gave a shit about putting quality, manuals together, and it just, nowadays, they don't do that anymore, and it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad, and I don't know what to take away from that. I guess it's just the changing times. Margins for PC games are just tighter nowadays, or I don't know. But anyway, Daggerfall was a game that was so immersive for me when I played it, and it consumed hundreds of hours of my life. I spent entire summers playing this thing because it was that good. And this was really before the time that I really had any concept of multiplayer gaming. And this single player game had consumed so much time. And nowadays, that doesn't seem to happen for me anymore. Single-player games just are not captivating like Daggerfall was for me. And I find that the games that really take up most of my time are multiplayer games. And that's, a logical evolution, I guess. But, back then, back in the day, so to speak, Daggerfall was a game that was so immersive that you could overlook all the bugs. You could overlook all the bugs and the glitches and the problems that you didn't care. You didn't care because the quests were randomized, the tone was dark, there were, nudity, monsters, every aspect of RPG-ism was covered. I mean, they had vampires, they had werewolves. You could play the game literally however you wanted. If you wanted to play as a vampire dark elf named Drizzt, or however you pronounce that dude's name, yeah, you could. And if you wanted to play a werewolf, you could. And if you want to play a thief or an Argonian, you played the game how you wanted to play it. And the quests were set up so that they were randomized, so you never knew quite what to expect. And they weren't all grand in scale. Some of the quests were rather mundane. It could be as simple as walking into a tavern, talking to the barkeep, and he'd ask you if you wanted to make some money going to find him a book in a nearby dungeon. And the dungeon would be randomized. You wouldn't know what the name of the dungeon would be. And, looking at your map, there were so many locations. There were probably, I would say, upwards of tens of thousands of cities and towns. And yes, they were all randomized, and some of them were, a couple buildings. But it was grand on a scale that I had never seen in a game before. And it was immersive in the sense that you could walk outside a town, and eventually you'd stumble across a small city that you'd never seen before. You could do that, and it wasn't a matter of I never hit the edges of the sandbox, so to speak. And I'll talk a little bit more about that with Oblivion and Morrowind. But you didn't realize you were in a sandbox because it was just so big. And yes, it was randomized, but it just didn't seem random, I guess, at the time. But let's fast forward. Let's fast forward a little bit and talk about Oblivion, which I got the collector's edition, not collector's, but Game of the Year edition, off of Amazon for about $17. And why did I do this? Because I like all of the Elder Scrolls games. I like to have the choice between playing them on a console or a PC, depending on how I feel, what I'm feeling like doing. If I just want to sit on the couch and play, Elder Scrolls, then I don't want to have to drag my laptop out here. But that is a rant for another time and another place. Oblivion, for me, I remember when they announced it. I remember when they announced Oblivion, and I was so excited about this game because I had invested so much time in Morrowind, and they were talking about this Radiant AI system. They were talking about these graphics looked amazing, horses, real horses, and it seemed like they had a chance. They had a chance to go back to something like Daggerfall and recreate that dark tone, but they didn't. And I believe me when I say that I was one of the people on day one that was shocked to discover that Radiant AI was glitchy and awkward, very awkward, and unsatisfying. And I was, one of the first to be kind of shocked that some of the graphics were not so good. Some of the animations were really awkward. Some of the, the graphics were just kind of like a console in that some portions of the game were absolutely gorgeous, and some portions of the game were just like ick, And I don't really fault the game for that, but it's clear that the fundamental change that was made is that Oblivion was geared for a console audience. It was geared for a wider audience. Nowadays, you couldn't sell a game like Daggerfall. You could not put Daggerfall on a shelf because this generation, this newer generation of gamers do not have the attention span for it. And that's not an insult. That's just saying that the times have changed. The mentalities of the gamers nowadays have changed. And if you sold a game like Daggerfall nowadays, the only people that would buy it would be the same people that are buying Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering and the kinds of people that really get into that stuff. And I don't think it would make sense for them to release a game like that because they wouldn't make the kind of money that they would when they release a game like Oblivion. Oblivion is a game that is easily digestible by a large audience. And that kind of segues into what direction is Skyrim going to take in terms of, are we going to see it go back to something like Daggerfall? Or are we going to see something where it's going to shift its focus to more like Oblivion, to be more accessible by a console audience? And no offense to a console audience, but sometimes things get dumbed down, and PC gamers notice this. Oblivion was kind of dumbed down compared to Morrowind, and even especially compared to Daggerfall. And Morrowind was dumbed down compared to Daggerfall, even more so. So it's really interesting to see the progression of what direction the Elder Scrolls is taking, and I think that Skyrim is really going to show us what direction they are going to be taking the series in the terms of, is it going to be more like Oblivion, or is it going to be more like something else that we haven't seen? And I'm crossing my fingers, that they recapture some of that magic that they had with Morrowind, at least, and Daggerfall. And I realize that a lot of gamers don't think the way I do about these things. They don't want to go back in time. They want to go forward. And all I can say is that they need to learn the lessons of Oblivion. And there were a lot of lessons to be had. Oblivion was ambitious, but did not go the whole way. And it was ambitious in the sense that they implemented this fancy graphics engine, but unfortunately didn't go all the way to polish it and make the ragdolls not awkward, and make some of the textures are kind of muddy, and the view distance bugs and whatnot. They needed to go the whole way, and I'm hoping Skyrim that they've learned from some of the mistakes of Oblivion and are going to release a game that is polished. And that's why I think you should pre-order Skyrim. If you are an Elder Scrolls fan, pre-order Skyrim, get it on Steam, go get it for Xbox. I don't care what system you want to play it on, it doesn't matter. I picked PC just because I want to be able to download mods and plugins and whatnot, but Give Bethesda a chance. If you had a bad experience with Oblivion like I did, give them another chance, because I think that from the footage that I've seen, I think that they've fixed a lot of the issues. Better animations, better, just it looks better in almost every regard. So I'm feeling good about it. I'm going to release some thoughts on Friday once I get done playing it a little bit, and go pre-order this game. It is awesome. It is cool, and Elder Scrolls is the best single-player RPG experience that you can find today. Thanks.